Hey guys, Ethan here from Extreme RC 4x4. Today I'm going to show you how to install metal differential gears into your CR12. If you're wondering about metal transmission gears, GPM offers those as well. But you can just go through the performance package install. That'll show you how to install those. If you're not running the performance package, that video will still show you how to tear down the transmission and essentially get those in there. But I already have those installed on this truck. Customer also wanted these installed, so these are GPM Thunder Tiger Kaiser XS steel differential gears. So you have to go on to the GPM racing website under Thunder Tiger for brands, and then Kaiser XS is the model. If you look up the Thunder Tiger Kaiser XS, you'll see that it's essentially a CR12 chassis, just set up differently, since this is the same thing as like a Thunder Tiger 4x4. Anyways, we can get right into the installation. I'm going to do the front axle first because I actually think the front axle is easier. What we're going to do first is remove the 2 screws on top of the knuckles. You want to make sure you don't lose these screws because they are shoulder screws specifically for the steering. Now what I'm going to do is actually pin the body on so that we're not fighting this. It is much easier just because of the fact that the body is attached by the lights. So until we can get rid of those, we're going to have to do this. Just throw a rag under here so I don't scratch his truck up. Now we're going to remove the screws in the bottom of the knuckles as well. There is 4 screws in the back of the axle housing here, which will allow you to take off the differential cover. So we're going to go ahead and remove those. Right now is also a good time to remove your drive shaft right here. Since it'll likely just fall off, I'm just going to set it aside. Now I can go ahead and pull the differential cover off. As you can tell from the factory, there's almost 0 grease in here, so it's important that you do get these greased. And the reason we pulled the knuckles off is so that we can pull the axle shafts out. Now the axle shafts are out, we can push from this gear in the back, and this whole assembly is going to come out, as well as we can push the pinion gear out. And just like that, we have removed the stock differential parts. Push this back a little ways. Now what we're going to need to do is remove this bearing from this side. And there's 4 screws that attach this ring gear. We're going to want to remove all 4 of these screws. So with all those screws set aside, you can pull that gear off and you can see the locker in here. It's actually a pretty good sized locker for being a 12 scale truck. I believe it's probably bigger than the ones in the SCX10s, but it could be downsized a little bit to maybe shrink these axle housings. Definitely a point where the CR12's lack is the size of the axle housings. A really nice touch of GPM is they include this hardware here to reattach this ring gear. We'll just place this on here, make sure we get everything lined up. and then we can get our screws out. Personally, I like to start all 4 screws first so that I know I'm not going to struggle to get any of them in or make sure the ring gear is on here perfectly centered. You don't need to torque those down too bad. Since they are just going into plastic, they're likely not going to come loose. The GPM pinion gear is one piece, which is pretty nice compared to the factory one, which is the shaft as well as the gear separate pieces. No problem with that, but this is definitely a nice upgrade. I'm just going to go ahead and put this gear back in here first. Make sure you didn't lose any bearings out of here when you remove the stock pinion gear. Now we're going to want to start our greasing. What I like to do is just have our bearings on here, and then we can fill in the teeth on this gear. You don't want to be too sparing with your greasing, but this is a pretty good amount here. The gears do only go in one direction, so make sure that you're putting it in the right way. Seat that in there, and then you can spin it around a little bit. Make sure everything is still free. We can pop our differential cover on here just by pulling this steering link back a little bit, and then we can pop it on here. It is what holds the ring gear in there. Now I'll take the knuckles and try to align those, get those in here. So now these are engaged, we can go ahead and throw some screws in there to make sure that the knuckles don't come apart. You do want to make sure they are engaged. Like you can see here, they spin together. Don't worry about making these screws too tight, because the shoulder is long enough that you can't actually tighten the knuckle against the C-hub. So you don't need to worry about that like you do on some other vehicles. I'm going to switch back over to my rounded bit, and we can go ahead and start reattaching the differential cover screws. Now that we have it all fixed up, before we put the drive shaft on, I do like to spin it around, get that grease going, and make sure everything's spinning free. If you feel a large amount of resistance, there's probably something that's not right on there. Go ahead and put this so the flat spot is facing up, and all of our drive shafts, you can see the screws are facing upwards. We're going to want to make sure the screws facing upwards on here as well. That way we know the drive shaft will be in phase and we won't have any issues with that. Now, before we forget, we're going to want to make sure to turn the truck back over, remove the body, and reinstall the shoulder screws that attach the top of the C-hubs. At this point, we can put the body back on. The rear axle is actually a more difficult process, which is kind of a rare case, being that the rear axle is more difficult. We're going to want to start by removing our hubcaps or the wheel nut covers. Sometimes they're on extremely tight on these CR12s, so if you just put a rag over the actual cover, they come off pretty easy, or you can just really reef on them with your fingers. Now we'll go ahead and remove the wheel nuts. Now those are removed, we're going to want to remove the screw right here in the axle, which it attaches the shock and the lower link to the axle. We're going to want to remove that screw. You only need to back the screw out enough to get the nut off of the end, because we need access to the screw that's behind the nut. Go ahead and pull the drive shaft off at this point as well. With our rounded driver, again, we can remove these two screws that hold on the straight axle ends of the rear axle. You can see them right there, and another one right here. You're going to want to remove these screws on both sides. There is some on the back side of the axle. Now we can remove the screws that hold the differential cover on. Now we can pull the differential cover off and pull the ends of the axle out. These are what hold the axle shafts in. Once you have those pulled out, you can push this ring gear out, as long as you can pull it. As you can see, this axle got quite a bit more grease than the front axle did, so that's worth noting. And we can go ahead and do the same thing we did on the front axle as far as replacing these gears with the metal ones. Okay, so now we can start putting it back together. Make sure this is seated in here. We'll throw our straight axle ends back on. You can do that just by rotating the hexes here and pushing into the housing. So just like that, they're both back engaged. Start on this back side since the truck is spun around this way with our small screws that attach the straight axle ends. Go ahead and throw the differential cover on. Now what we're going to do is make sure we reinstall the nuts onto the link and shock screw here. Just get it started with our finger. Once that's started, we can take our pliers and snug it down. Same thing on the other side. Make sure everything is still spinning good back here, and we'll go ahead and reattach the drive shaft. Same thing as the front. Make sure the screw is facing up so the drive shaft is in phase. And pop it on here. Now what's happening here is the pinion gear is pushed into the housing, so the holes aren't lining up. That's just because of a little slop in these axles, so we'll just take a smaller driver and use it to pull that out, get everything lined up nicely. That attached, we can go ahead and put the wheels and tires back on. Okay, I just realized I missed a bearing on this rear axle, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back in there. Okay, so just as easy as that, you can install metal gears, metal differential gears into your CR12 axles. Really easy install in my opinion, and definitely not a project I would be afraid of if you're brand new to the hobby. If you've been doing this a while, really would not be afraid of that. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section. I'll try to help you out. But these gears are a really good upgrade for these trucks, really help improve the durability. I actually have not stripped a set of the stock plastic gears yet, but I have stripped a set of the transmission gears, so I do run metal gears in my transmissions. The only reason I have installed metal gears on a truck like this before was because it is my custom chassis and I'm running a 540 motor, and I was going for a competition the next day and I knew I would probably eat them up with a 540 motor. So yeah, really easy install, highly recommend it. It is about 2 weeks shipping for these, so you might want to order them ahead of time if you are planning on being that kind of driver that's just hard on things. But anyways guys, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.